Willie Boy was born around 1882 to Mary Snyder, a famous Chemehuevi basket weaver, and raised in a Nuuvi, or southern Paiute family in the Chemehuevi Valley at the shores of Lake Havasu. Willie Boy grew up running an indigenous tradition in the area and raced from the Mojave Desert to the Pacific coast in a few days. It was a critical skill to keep alliances, trade, and send messages between villages. The runners relied on watering holes along the route, which they recalled by reciting songs that acted as maps to guide them. Willie Boy was also a spiritual person and possibly influenced by the ghost dance, a 19th century indigenous movement led by Wovoka. Wovoka was a prophet of the Paiute people who had a vision after falling into a coma during the solar eclipse of January 1st, 1889. He saw the return of those who had left us and the exit of the settlers and their ways from the land. Wovoka instructed the indigenous people to live true and perform a traditional round dance called the ghost dance. At the time, settlers caused intense conflict. While Willie Boy embraced his people's traditions, he also learned English and worked with the ranchers to establish a job as a quiet, hard-working cow puncher with a good reputation. In 1909, Willie Boy left for the oasis of Mara, an area the Serrano described as the place of little springs and much grass. According to legend, a Serrano spiritual leader instructed his people to live there so that it would be fruitful and they would raise many children. Each time a boy was born, they were to plant a palm tree, and in its first year the Serrano had 29 palm trees at the oasis, providing them with the food, clothing, tools, and shelter they needed. It was later called 29 Palms. Willie Boy may not have known the intimate charm of its surroundings, but during his stay he met his 16-year-old cousin Carlotta Boniface. She was the daughter of a spiritual healer and Chemehuevi chief named William Mike. The two shared a loving interest, but tradition enforced parental guidance to avoid violating the marriage norms of the Nuuvi. Willie Boy was also 12 years older and may have lacked the status to marry a tribal chief's daughter. Ignoring tradition, Carlotta did not seek her elders' counsel, did not ask her parents for permission, or inform the community of their intentions. Instead, she left with Willie Boy under the cloak of the desert night. Chief William Mike and his family found the couple and after great disapproval separated them. Carlotta stayed at the oasis with her family, and Willie Boy found work in Redlands in the brickyard before moving to Banning as a cowboy at the Gilman Ranch. Not long after, Carlotta's family also moved to the Gilman Ranch for work picking fruit. The couple soon reunited, and once again, against her father's wishes, they broke away to see each other, with Willie showering her with gifts. It was decided that on the night of September 26, Willie Boy would seek her father's permission to marry Carlotta. But whether he felt threatened by him or after being told no, he stole a .30 Winchester from one of the ranch buildings. What happens next varies by account, with some saying Willie was drunk, possibly having a history of this, or that after his proposal, William Mike struck Carlotta, leading to a struggle in front of the family and the fatal shooting of her father. A third version is simply an accident in which the gun discharged in a violent confrontation. Willie and Carlotta ran off without much supply or a horse, as Maria, William Mike's wife, delayed reporting the crime to the Indian police. Some believe Maria purposely gave them a head start. In contrast, others claim Willie threatened her if anyone should follow. By morning, word got out, and the couple had made their way to the hills above the Morongo Indian Reservation. The constable, Marshal Ben de Crevecoeur, arrived and began investigating the murder, claiming a friend and co-worker of Willie's admitted to sharing his bottle of liquor with him. He derived the story that Willie was drunk and approached William Mike in his sleep, shooting him in the eye. He also said Mike's wife grabbed Willie, but he broke free, throwing a silk handkerchief and garter at Carlotta, demanding she follow. It's important to note that the temperance movement across America was underway, and anything to blame the bottle on made better headlines. It was also revealed at the time that an alcohol-related arrest paid more for law enforcement. The newspapers ran with this so-called story of drunkenness, also citing a 1906 arrest he made for disturbing the peace. In those days, such a broad charge could be applied to many different offenses, but there is not enough evidence to say he even was drunk. To further compound the murder, President William Howard Taft was visiting the San Bernardino area, so it grew to national attention. Sensational spoke of an unfounded tribal revolt and even a plot to assassinate President Taft. Journalists flocked to Banning and rented horses, and others came via the Santa Fe Railroad to Victorville to report on what they called the last manhunt. The pressure was now on the local law enforcement, who organized a posse that included 2 indigenous trackers who guided them through the afternoon. The posse followed the couple's trail through the orchards to the Southern Pacific Railroad. East of Cabazon, the posse found where they had struck for the hills to the south. They found the pair had spent some time at One Horse Spring, southeast of Cabazon. Then the trail led east again through the pass. Near Fingal, a low spur from San Jacinto Peak projects into the pass. The trail led up this spur and onto the mountain's south face. Finally, the tracks led downward toward the lonely and isolated Whitewater Ranch. The posse divided, and the members stationed themselves around the ranch. They watched through a wild night of storm and wind, thinking to close in on Willie Boy in the morning. But sometime before dawn, he and Carlotta escaped to Whitewater Canyon. The flight led through Morongo Valley to the Pipes in San Bernardino County. San Bernardino County officers joined the hunt with Sheriff J.C. Ralphs and Deputy Sheriff Carls Reich in charge. After 10 days of chasing through the desert, the posse was exhausted, and the national spotlight on their ineptitude embarrassed them. The couple would zigzag among the watering holes and peaks. On October 7th, thinking they were free to rest, the couple stopped at the Pipes, unaware their assailants were near. Several historians believe a tracker far ahead of the posse aimed at the back of Carlotta, mistaking her for Willie Boy, who escaped. Her death was not announced by the mortified tracker, instead leaving her body to be found by the advancing posse that quickly blamed Willie Boy. Newspapers carried the news, but evidence revealed in 1994 that the bullet had been fired from a faraway distance, supporting Willie Boy's innocence. Part of the defeated posse carried Carlotta back to Banning and re-outfitted. Newspapers interviewed Clara True, an agent in charge at the Morongo Indian Reservation, who told everyone that a revolt was imminent, as Willie Boy would get help from the local tribes. In the panic, the sheriff moved the Chemehuevi and Serrano out of their homes and took them in for questioning. While settlers prepared their guns, Willie Boy tried to survive on foraged lizards and pinon nuts. It's interesting to note that the newspapers spoke of a second man first seen near Houston Flats, trying to act as a decoy for Willie Boy, perhaps to mislead the officers. He had 2 belts filled with cartridges and was carrying, in addition to a Winchester, a revolver. It's unclear if he was ever caught. On October 8th, Willie Boy returned to where Carlotta had been shot and spotted the posse in the pipes. Unaware that Carlotta was carried away, he tried to protect the spot, thinking she was still there, by leading the posse away north into the Ruby Mountain. It was in the maze of Ruby Mountain that about 1 p.m., as the 5 men rode down a sandy wash bordered by vast piles of weathered granite, the crack of a rifle came from somewhere high up into the rocks. 11 bullets followed the men's horses. At this point, the newspapers wrote that Willie Boy shot the horses in the neck to stun them, with a temporary paralysis, a so-called technique used by the Paiutes to capture wild horses. While the horse lay dead, it recovered, although bloody, and left with another injured horse, leaving the men to approach on foot. I researched this technique from the olden days, and although it had a term called creasing, it had a sad 1 in 50 chance of not killing the horse. The idea was to shoot the wild horse on the top of the neck, just in front of the withers, about an inch or so deep close to the spinal column. Once the horse was stunned, the pursuer tied the horse's feet together before it had recovered. Obviously, it would take an expert shot and would leave a nasty hole in the horse's neck that, if not healed, could lead to other problems. 1 man was hit. The bullet shattered the handcuffs in his hip pocket and sending shrapnel into his hip. It is said that for 6 hours the officer lay in the sun where he had fallen, unable to be moved, a clear target, but not what Willie wanted to do. The party, eager to get the injured Deputy Resch to safety, had to abandon the effort. Sheriff John Rouse and his posse lay crouched behind rocks through the night. The shooting had ceased. At length, at about 10:30 p.m., they heard a single muffled shot. In the morning, exhausted from lack of food and rest, they were forced to abandon the search, with their horses starving and no supplies within 50 miles. They carried the wounded Resch back to Banning with half the men on foot. At its height, Willie Boy evaded 3 posses numbering 100 men, several chuck wagons, some automobiles, and journalists. Between the sheriff, who left San Bernardino and entered the desert via Bear Valley, Deputy Sheriff George Hewins led the second posse, possibly reaching the desert through Victorville, and the third group moved through Whitewater. The 3 posses planned to reunite back near Granite Peak, where Willie Boy was said to ambush the officers. On October 15th, 3 days after Taft's train left without incident, the posse came upon the rocks where the last shot took place. According to initial reports, the posse fired at the rock pile where Willie Boy was last seen, and a cloud of green blowflies lifted off, suggesting his death. The posse found a body badly decomposed and burned it on the rocks where it lay, claiming Willie Boy took off 1 shoe and placed the rifle to his head, firing the last bullet he had with his toe. A reporter for the Los Angeles Record, Randolph Madison, took photos of the body with the posse posing around him. However, the photo evidence does not add up. Today, forensic scientists have analyzed the photos and marked the body as no more than a day old, citing a week in the desert is long and the environment would not be so kind. His head was also face down, causing many to wonder if it was even Willie Boy. Could the man they found be the copycat the newspapers wrote of? Yet how much fact can we really draw on from the journalists? For many years, the stories of the Chemehuevi elders went unheard as they spoke of Willie Boy finding his home among the southern Paiute of Pahrump, Nevada, a sacred spot for the Nuuvi, where he could find help and spiritually cleanse himself. Some even attest to seeing him, as Chief Pikoka said he smoked a pipe with Willie Boy under a yucca in Arizona. Others attest to his death of tuberculosis sometime between 1927 and 1935. This has been Biographies of the West. My name is Lorin Morgan-Richards. Thanks for watching.